At Elevate One Consulting, we specialize in executive, business, and accountability coaching tailored just for you. Discover the power of enhanced leadership skills, improved performance, and increased self-awareness. Our expert coaches will help you navigate challenges, articulate your vision, and establish a work-life balance. With Elevate One Consulting, you get proven methodologies to drive growth and success, insightful feedback and personalized strategies, clear goals, and actionable plans. Whether you're a C-suite executive, business owner, or entrepreneur, our coaching programs are designed to help you thrive. Visit www.elevateoneconsulting.com and take your first steps towards a focused future. Elevate One Consulting. Innovate, grow, elevate. Welcome to The Unbroken Place, where it begins and ends with empathy. I'm your host, Eddie Paul Thomas, and this week we are treating you to a crossover event called Unbroken Streams. This episode is a collaboration between me, the Unbroken Place podcast, and Dave Capozzi of the Dig New Streams podcast. On this episode, Dave and I discuss the topic of giving back to your community in 2024. It's a pretty important and timely subject as we are all feeling the effects of inflation, from the high cost of living to nonprofit leaders attempting to figure out how to survive on what seems to be a smaller and smaller pool of donation money, to many individuals who are trying to figure out how to not just keep their heads above water. Many of us, regardless of our financial situation, are just wired to give back. But how do we do that? Well, let's get into it. We are back again, Unbroken Streams. We're having a conversation between me and my dear friend Dave Capozzi, who is the host of another podcast that you may have heard of. Dave, you want to tell them a little bit about it real quick?
Yes, it's called Dig New Streams, and it's generally about the idea for the podcast came about after I left pastoring and yet still sought depth and understanding and wisdom and spirituality outside of an institutional church setting, and the podcast was an effort to do that. So I have guests like Eddie and others who I find to be inspiring and interesting, who can sort of help me understand new ways of thinking and new life-giving ways of approaching this existence.
Yeah, and it's wonderful because Dave and I first met on TikTok, which is just strange for someone near 50 saying, but it's been really cool to see how we've kind of developed communities of people who aren't just looking to argue or debate topic. There's rarely any debating. It's like, hey, that's a good point. How can we improve on your point that you just made? And there's some collaborations that go on, and there's really some really cool communities that I see on TikTok. No shade to any other platform, but it just seems more natural on TikTok for some reason.
Yeah.
I'd love to be in the back end of those conversations and in those rooms when they're developing it. But
agreed.
We've come today to discuss a topic that Dave and I love so much, and it's really, what does giving back look like? Giving back to your community in 2024. And if you guys will give me just a short runway, I'll explain why it's such an important topic. When we look at the reality of philanthropy, just the amount of money that people give to causes, it's changed. 2024 does not look like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. According to Philanthropy Roundtable, the average American donates only between 2 and 3% of their annual income to charity. And that varies a little bit depending on income and location. But in 2022 specifically, Americans gave 1.7% of their disposable income to charity, which is the lowest percentage that's been calculated since 1995. The majority of charitable dollars went to religion, which was 24%, human services, 14%, education, 14%, grant-making foundations at 13%, and then public society benefits at 10%. And when I think about some of this and how it's broken down, again, this is me going super nerd on Dave early, so I apologize to Dave and to you guys listening today. But according to Nonprofit Pro, despite Asian and white Americans having the highest income and Black Americans having the lowest income from 2000 to 2018, Black Americans gave it a higher rate of their income to charity. And this number jumps out for a number of reasons in the Black community, which include a desire to see specific community interests addressed, as well as the growth of giving circles. And if you haven't heard what giving circles are, this is where multiple individuals, instead of individual people giving, multiple people with similar philanthropic goals pool their money together to make a bigger difference in their given cause, their preferred cause. And so this is 2024. When we're looking at charity donations at a 30-year low, the major causes of this are inflation, the rise in crowdfunding, and a decline. And this is where, bringing in Dave and his background as a pastor, we'll find this pretty interesting. There's an absolute decline in organized religion. According to Gallup, the percentage of U.S. adults who attend religious services every week, or almost every week, has declined from 42% decades ago to now 30% today. As an example, Christianity pre-pandemic, and it's important to get the pre-pandemic numbers because everything kind of shifted during the pandemic.
Yeah.
But pre-pandemic, approximately 3,500 people left religious congregations every single day. Wow. And that's a rate of 1.2 million walking away from their given religion every single year. So for those of us, and the data would show again, that so many of us have a giving heart, want to give back. We're struggling to figure out what those things are because of inflation, because of all the things that we're trying to do as individuals just to survive. How do we still give back? So that's really our topic. That's our on-ramp today, to just kind of look at how can those of us who have that heart, who are still wanting to give and maybe don't have the ability to jump into nonprofit or what have you, what does that look like today?
Those numbers are pretty staggering, Eddie. I feel like it makes sense to me just from the general feel, inflation going up, but it also, I guess I'm curious about how some of our more like foundational societal disconnects are at the root of this too, right? So I'm curious about the numbers previous to 1995 and what were the organizations or the most commonly given to charitable organizations. Do you have any of that information, or do you know generally what that would be?
Before 95, I figured I didn't want to bore people too much. It's just being real with that. But the numbers, just going back to my nerd self, we're still church, church, synagogue, religious affiliation was the biggest.
Yeah.
And then it kind of trickled down from there.
Okay.
But there's a common thread that I continue to read as I looked at those things, Dave. And it's that people don't trust big organizations anymore.
Yeah.
They don't trust big churches. They don't trust big organizations. They don't trust government. When it comes to even like when we're talking about grant or philanthropic endeavors, the word trust just kept coming. And these aren't my words, folks. This is what the studies are revealing. Gallup and the latter. People don't trust big organizations, so they want to crowdsource. They want to figure out different ways to come up with money for a given issue, whether it be mental, physical, spiritual, what have you.
Oh, that's so interesting. Well, crowdfunding, that's on the rise, and you see that everywhere. You see individuals looking for money, you see groups looking for money. I gotta be honest, I trust those the least. And I'm not. I'm not.
Yeah.
I understand people's like hesitance to trust large organizations. That is
Right.
throughout society. That's liberal. That's conservative. People are just not feeling the large corporation or the large entity. But for
Hmm.
me, I've been burned so many times by people that are like, "We need money for this thing," and then you find out that they're scamming you,
Oh,
someone that you might have trusted, and so like you've got all of this people. It's like an endless amount of things to give to. I wonder how much people are also overwhelmed by not being able to choose.
yeah.
Like, should I give to homelessness? Should I give to education? What should I give to? Should I give to my church? And is my church going to use the money the right way? And
Right. Right.
all of that sort of that mindset that honestly is post, like, here's the nerd in me, post Reformation, where this sort of individualized my choice about what is important to me and not necessarily my community. um,
Yeah.
Whereas in communal spaces like church and synagogues, or mosques, it's like, well, we trust that the people that are in charge of our community are going to discern where our money's going to go.
Yeah.
Less of that. It comes back to trust again. To your point.
Yeah. It's an incredible. I had the conversation with Kathy Rogers, who was on the podcast, and she brought up a wonderful point. Just thinking about the ways in which individuals are having some issues with trust, and that it is hard. If you're working for, I won't name any major nonprofits. I think that's the wrong way to go about this conversation. But individuals don't understand something as important as overhead, and they
Yes.
they look at those numbers like, okay, fine. I saved for a couple years. I'm going to give $1,000 to X nonprofit, and then they see that 70% of that is just to cover staffing.
Yeah.
And there's such an attitude towards that,
Yeah.
that you have to also understand that that staff are the ones who are making it happen. The ones who are feeding the poor, the ones who are providing housing and shelter and all the different things that are um, going on. So the overhead becomes a big thing too with
Yes.
investors. Like, what is my, and this is, I don't care what religion you are. I've spoken to Hindu, Muslim, Christian. One of the things that people kind of roll their eyes at is the person who's willing to donate to name a cause, and then they want to know their return on investment.
Yeah. Right.
And it kind of flies in the face of what the donation is for in the first place. But that, again, that's where we are in 2024.
This is, I work for a nonprofit. I believe you do as well, Eddie, right? And
Hmm. Correct.
this is a difficult. There's a major disconnect between the people on the ground who are
Hmm.
doing the work in the organizations, and the people, and the volunteers, and the administration, and then the board of directors, and then whoever's. So there's a lot of decisions that get made at that board level
Right.
when those people aren't necessarily seeing or as connected to the mission being carried out. And
Yeah.
so it's this very difficult thing for people to understand, that when you're on the ground servicing the thing that money is being thrown at,
Hmm.
you notice the things that really need work. You start to pay more attention. You're learning. People who are just giving money to something, or who are making decisions from higher seats, often are disconnected from the issue itself.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
so that creates a scenario where those people think that they know what's right, when what's right may escape them because they don't really understand the root of the issue or what's really happening on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that causes more distrust all around.
It's huge, and it can become a stumbling block for any donor who finally finds themselves in that space where they can actually do things financially.
Yeah.
I've come into this money, I've earned it, or it's been handed down, whatever the situation is, and you're ready to donate,
Yeah.
and you have this row of thousands of worthy nonprofits, all of them having great impact, and you're sitting there like, who do I give this to?
Right.
What do I do with this?
Right.
And so in some instances, I understand the return on investment conversation,
Yeah.
but it also becomes a hindrance when now you've pitted people against each other to earn your dollars, so to speak, using air quotes there for
Yeah.
those just listening. So
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I guess I'm curious from your perspective what this has looked like. I know in my circles
mhm,
that there was a growing distrust for institutional religion, and this starts with like the late 90s, early 2000s. Gen Xers really gave us a lot
mhm,
of good, solid you're a Gen Xer. I'm a millennial, right?
mhm,
Solid distrust. And then it grew into this kind of like, well, let's just create our own little communities, and we'll collect money together, and we'll
mhm,
decide what needs are being met within our own community. I
yeah,
think from my perspective, from white evangelicalism and sort of like whiteness in general, there is this individualism that prevents connectedness.
mhm,
And recently,
yeah,
I had this question asked about like, do you feel like you're making a difference in the world? And to be
mhm,
honest, the thing that motivates me to speak or act in any way is always a connection to an issue or a person.
yeah,
And I think that since COVID, since things are becoming more and more disconnected, more and more challenged with human connection, maybe there's something there where we don't feel like we know people who are directly impacted by a certain thing, and so we don't know what to give to. There's
yeah,
a lot of just not feeling connected going on. So I could see that connectedness, that lack of community, that lack of trust really playing into this, on top of the severe financial situation that a lot of people find themselves in. All of
yeah,
that combined, you've got all these organizations out there, probably way more than there were in 1995,
mhm,
just struggling to keep their doors open, struggling to provide the services that they opened to me.
yeah. Gosh, that's such a good point. And I've always been kind of a ripple effect guy,
Mm,
where I want to invest most where I am. There's nothing wrong with the amazing work that they're doing in this city, this state, or that country. Whatever it is that's going on. If I have extra, that's where the money goes. But I'm always one who's believed in the idea of dropping the pebble in the lake where where I am,
yes.
and watching the ripple effect go from there, whether it be education or health or what have you.
Yeah.
um, it's also easier for me to trust in that circle.
Yeah.
It's easier for me to connect with people and get to know people. um, and I gosh, I'm going to sound really old saying this, but but I grew up, gosh, it really sounds old when I say this.
I love it.
I was born in 74.
Okay.
Okay. So when I was watching TV and you see the images and the things that are coming out, there were maybe 5, 6 channels,
Right.
max,
Right.
max, you know? So you had no choice but to trust what those people were saying on those channels. Now,
True.
it may not have been true in your particular area, but you kind of had to build this trust. You're watching Walter Cronkite or any number of other guys tell you what's going on in the news, and you're like,
Mm,
okay, I should do something about that locally. I should go and volunteer. I should go and be a mentor or whatever it is based on what they said.
mm,
um, and even locally with your pastor, preacher, your whoever telling you what the needs are, community organizer telling you what the needs are, you
yes.
you respond to that local person because you trusted them.
Yes.
In some ways, I do not envy this generation because information comes from everywhere
Yep.
and it comes quick. And your job, which I laughed because I had a couple of interns that I was helping in marketing communications in January through June. I said, your job is to discern that information, source it, find out the sources and make sure they're trustworthy, and disseminate that respond within like a minute or two.
Mm,
And it's insane.
that's
It
insane.
does not build trust
No,
at all.
no.
You know, I saw, not to toot your horn too much here, but I saw something that you had spent years researching and studying and, you know, sitting down with people and having conversations to learn even more, to make it more personal for you to be invested. You made a statement on TikTok and 35 people came at you and said, "This is not true. That's the wrong thing, blah, 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 blah." They're just hitting you back. And you say, "Well, according to this, I'm correct. Is there something that you can think of that would contradict that?" And within, seconds, Dave,
Oh,
they're responding, "Oh, that's untrue. That's untrue." There's no way that they did any research.
right.
And so this is the environment that we're in,
Yes.
where trust is dangling on by a thread.
Yep. Absolutely.
And people are, I wouldn't say siloed, because it's always been siloed in
Right.
this country, but it seems like there's a digital silo
Mm-hmm.
that has now come up. And so as you look to your community and what you can do,
Yeah.
it's almost like a home base for you. Like, okay, I don't know if I can even trust what they're saying is going on in Alabama or you know, Boston or wherever. I'm going to stick here. And so
Right.
as people are looking at, Dave, like their own communities, as they're looking at the place where they want to have that impact, or maybe the ripple effect that I was talking about.
Yeah.
And shout out to Stephanie Romero, who got my brain working on that phrase. I can't let go of it now.
Love it.
Um, what are some things that you've seen that are kind of a net positive when people are thinking about ways to give back in their community?
I think what it comes down to today. So when people get behind an issue, for instance, what I noticed, I think it was, now this is not my circle. Okay. This is like actually a lot of the people that I'm about to reference would probably have a very different worldview than me. But there was a movie that came out that was about like sex trafficking. And all of a sudden you see increased giving, you see increased awareness, you see more and more about that. And strangely, that becomes a partisan issue. So like if you start giving to, you know, sex trafficking organizations, then somehow that makes you conservative or something. I don't know. But right. But like when people are able to connect with a story and they understand, wow, I had no idea that was going on. It's then you start to see people talking about it. They're like, they come out in droves. And when they don't feel like they're the problem, then they might be willing to give. I think people, you know, I think if you see, let's say, you know, in the community that I work in, that serves folks experiencing homelessness, I bet the people in the area don't really give much to it. Because they might see it as a nuisance or a threat, or they might see them as antagonistic to the neighborhood. Whereas like people in the suburbs are disconnected from the issue, but they care about it, right? So like we're humans. This is why we give back. We care. We care about each other. We care about what we hear. We care about the stories that are told. And I do think that what I've seen work, especially in institutions where faith is a component, because faith seems to drive people to want to do more in their community. And to do good to their fellow human being. When they can connect with a story, with a person, with a concept that connects with their values, they're likely to give even in a sustaining way. That's been my experience. But my generation is kind of like, screw you. I don't want anything to do with, I'm just trying to raise my family. And I feel under attack. I feel like I can barely do that well enough. And a lot of that I do think comes from being jaded about churches demanding 10% and then people feeling like it's not being used in ways that they would want. So there's just again, it always does go back to distrust. But what I've seen work is when people feel connected and they maybe know someone that might be like, oh, I didn't realize that they might have been going through that too. Then that sort of elicits some compassionate response, often some dollars.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah. I think, when people are interested, and this is the wonderful part of being able to consult with organizations, and they want to do something like this. Um, the idea is to form partnerships easily.
Yeah,
That's number one. Form partnerships with people who are already doing the work in the community, wherever it is. You don't need to be the expert. You don't
true.
need to start your own nonprofit. Find people who are already doing the work and help them become the hands and feet for their organization.
Yes.
I have a friend right now. She's probably going to hate that I say this, but my friend Mona in Indianapolis is doing work for Habitat for Humanity.
Hmm.
Has been doing it for years, and to see the pictures that she puts up on social media, it's just it's making a difference. So connecting with your friends who are doing these things, I may not know how to measure, twice and cut once or do anything else with regard to the house. But you know what I can do? I can go and pick up some wood. I can help
Mm,
you guys, bring stuff into the house as you're building it. I can bring everybody food. I can, just connecting with people who are doing those things in your community are so important.
mm,
Um, I think the second thing, Dave, and I don't think there's any particular order to this, but um, the second is figuring out where your talents are. What do you have a passion for?
yeah,
Um, there is no shortage of children who need mentoring.
right.
No shortage. And it doesn't necessarily need to be in a school somewhere or in a church or in a program. It could be in your neighborhood.
Mm,
Well, hopefully people in your neighborhood, but there are tons of kids who need mentoring or even tutoring.
mm,
Um, so it's not necessarily the need to go drive somewhere or go spend an hour or two somewhere else. It could be in your own neighborhood.
yes.
But those are like the first two that come to mind.
Yeah.
Um,
That
when it comes to right where you are kind of stuff. We'll be back with the Unbroken Place in just a moment. Revitalize your brand and accelerate your impact with Eddie and Erica at Elevate One Consulting. Experts in organizational development, digital marketing, and much more. From leadership coaching to creating unforgettable digital experiences, we've got you covered. Visit elevateoneconsulting.com today. Elevate One Consulting. Innovate, grow, elevate. Imagine a place where the untold stories of Black missionaries are amplified, honored, and celebrated. A place that bridges the legacy of the people of the way with the powerful missions work of today's African diaspora. Welcome to the Black Missions Museum, a digital project dedicated to preserving the voices, culture, and legacy of Black missionaries across the globe. But we need your help to bring this vision to life. Your support makes a difference. Join us in this mission by donating today. Just click the link in the show notes to give and be a part of history. Together, we can inspire future generations and keep the legacy alive. And we're back.
that makes so much sense to me. I mean, when I was in community organizing, all we ever talked about was getting people to connect with their self-interest and not being
Mm-hmm.
sort of ashamed of
Yeah.
having a self-interest. You want something better for yourself. Likely that affects other people too. And so that's how community organizing is similar to marketing because it's basically like human psychology. It's getting in touch with the people and what's their motivation. And from my perspective, when someone feels impacted by an issue, whatever that is, they're going to either give of their money or their time. And so if you're a person who is involved in an organization that's trying to do that, then your job, if people are questioning what you're doing with your resources or what they give you, isn't to be defensive as much as it is to help the person, then help that person see how what you are spending your resources that they give is connecting with their self-interest. And I just think that that's harder and harder. I will say personally, I find it hard to give to charities nowadays because I care about systems change, and a lot of charities are focused on individual needs being met.
Yeah.
And I have a hard time thinking about this because the way our society is set up is it's either a government entity or it's a corporation or you got a nonprofit, which we've all sort of understood that there's like a nonprofit, like a, what do you call it? There's like corporate greed, and it's happening in nonprofit too because of this
Mhm.
lack that we feel. And I wonder if there was more of an abundance of giving, if there would be that same
Yeah.
kind of competition or, I think a lot of people, what it comes down to, including myself, are jaded.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to, personally, the way I am, if I care about an issue, I'm going to either speak on it or do something about it. It's
Mhm.
unlikely for me that money's going to leave to go do something. It's very
Yeah.
unlikely.
Yeah. I think just to and not to beat up on nonprofits, because I love nonprofits, the
True.
people
Yeah.
who are
Same.
there.
Yeah.
I want to be very clear. The talents that sit at nonprofits, these people could be making 3 to 4 times the money that they're making.
No question. And then
No matter what their
people that
skill is.
know about their salaries complain that they're making like 100K. It's like, what do you
Right.
want? They gotta live too, right?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So, but just in terms of nonprofits, one of the things that people may not understand also, it's not just the average donor, the guy or gal who's giving $25 a month or the
Yeah.
$5 a month or whatever. When you're talking about nonprofits that are funded by grants, government grants, they have to stay in their lane.
Yes.
There's a whole process that you have to go through as a nonprofit to get the assistance to get started, and it can be it's very similar to when I interview people for my book. When I talk to them about, hey, why aren't you speaking out on this issue? This seems right up your alley. You've got the platform. Because it's going to cost them. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to cost them donors. It's going to cost them all of these different things. So it's a very thin tightrope that you walk as a nonprofit.
Yeah.
Um, and that's why finding other ways to get involved are so important for me. I will always advocate give to a nonprofit something that comes from your heart. If you've got a personal connection, you've got friends or family who work there, college roommates who work there, whatever, give to those nonprofits. But I think with regard to where we are now and people having trouble, just making it paycheck to paycheck and being able to pay for the mortgage or rent, these opportunities to do other things are so important. And
Mm.
so I look for me, my gifting has always been in one of two places: coaching or digital.
Yeah.
Digital came ironically as I was winding down my coaching days. They
Mm.
just kind of overlapped. And I started this digital world by literally tripping backwards and falling into it and ending up loving it. But I think, we spoke of mentorship before. Digital mentorship is a very real thing. Crisis and text hotlines are real things. I know
Yes.
that one of the really cool things that a lot of nonprofits utilize are writers.
Yeah.
So if you have a gifting for writing, the way, if you have that skill, giving five hours a week to help them write some blogs or things like that. There are a number of ways in which you could help, and especially now that we're in this huge digital age, where everybody has their own platform. Like literally, they build their own brand and everything online.
Yep.
I mean, imagine you've got even a small following of 1,000 people, and you donate 5 hours of your time to content creation for, name the nonprofit. And again, I'm not trying to give any favorites over any others, but name the one that's near and dear to your heart, and
Yeah.
you jump on their platform and say something for 5 minutes. It's just
It's a great idea.
an opportunity for people to utilize those skills and their passion for a given thing, um, by 4 or 5 hours a week.
Yeah. I love that idea. The way my brain works, I just keep thinking, like, what is it that will motivate a person to want to connect and give back to their
Mm-hmm.
community in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah.
And I think it needs to start with a person feeling given to themselves. So, you
Yeah.
know,
That's
how can
important.
you give if you haven't received is a general concept that I think holds a lot of truth. It's the same thing as being on a plane and putting the air mask on before you give it. It's like, are people feeling like their needs are being met before they're being asked to meet someone else's needs?
Mm-hmm.
And in a society that's growing in distrust and growing in a lack of resources
Mm-hmm.
across communities, you know,
Yeah.
um, how do we make sure that people are feeling like they're getting their needs met? And I remember having a conversation with someone
Yeah.
a few months back about this, that if you want anyone to listen to you, you've got to meet their needs,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And if people feel that connection, then they'll give you they'll give you everything. And I think that that's what, if you're the kind of person who is in a position where you're ready to give back, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
money or your energy, I guess I would question, this is what I've had to think about for myself. One, what's my relationship to money? And two, what's my relationship to my community? So
Mm-hmm.
money has been, for a lot of us, we don't think about our relationship to it. We don't think about how our sort of mental health is, or our brain thinks about it. But I have a lot of baggage when it comes to thinking about money, and I've had to process that. And then also what my connection to my community is. What do I have a community? What is it?
Yeah.
And I think if you ask those questions of yourself, and then you're able to sort of go down the line and what do I care about? Ask yourself those questions, and you might just find yourself then connecting with one group. What is that group?
Yeah.
What is that entity? And
Mm-hmm.
then making contact. I think it's that going down the line of what is alive within you, and then connecting that with something outside of you. That's where I would begin.
I think, see, I love what you're saying there. And I think I would challenge those who have the ability. And again, this is not just money. In fact, this is the opposite of money. This is your time, where
Yeah.
you're willing to give time. For me, I push back on one little part.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know if it's a pushback or maybe an addendum to what you're saying, but the concept for for me, Dave, is that if you are successful in any way, shape, or form,
Mm.
in any way, shape, or form, um, and you put the parameters on what you label as success. There's not one of us in the history of man who has been a self-made man or woman
Truth.
in this country. Specifically, I'm going to keep it within these borders here. You have made it because you had either a good parent at some point. They don't have to be, aces for your entire life. At some point, they did something to feed you, clothe you, help you believe in yourself, take you on an experience,
Yeah.
what have you. We can also insert into that role uncle, aunt, mentor, coach, teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Someone has helped propel you and helped you find and unearth that skill or talent or drive in you
Yeah.
that has gotten you to where you are if you consider yourself a successful person.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I would challenge people to look inwardly as well, to go along the lines of what you're saying, but realizing it's not just about you. It's about respecting and responding to the love and care you've received before.
That's good.
And it doesn't have to, take religion, take politics, throw all that out. Look at the people in your life. Go back, just take 5 minutes after this podcast, folks, and just think about your life for the past 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, however old you are. And think about all the people who have actually opened doors for you.
Hmm.
People who have picked you up when you've fallen, when you were sick, they carried you. And think about the fact that there are so many of us right now who are struggling to get by, organizations that are on their last legs, but they're doing amazing work, but there's just not enough money coming in, or they don't have, somebody to help them write the stories. I mean, just whatever it is that your skill is. And could you take 5 minutes? That's an exaggeration. Let me retract that. Can you take an hour or two per week to donate that to an organization you believe in?
Yeah, that's good. We need someone like Keith Lee for nonprofits. Like Keith Lee, the food, the guy who
Oh, okay. You said food, and I was like, there we go. Light
Yep.
bulb. Go ahead.
Where they call it the Keith Lee effect, where he always asks the question, is it marketing or is their product just not it? And he gets, like, once he tastes it and he gives it a good rating, then they just start their lines out the door for forever. You need someone to go around from nonprofit to nonprofit and, like, test those things. Is it just their marketing, or are they just not doing the work? 99% of the time, to be honest, the organizations that I've been around, because for 20 years I've worked with nonprofits, they're doing the work.
Yeah.
They just don't have the resources to convince everyone that they're doing the work. The vast majority don't. Like, the big ones, like the large nonprofits that everyone's heard of, they've got massive marketing teams.
Mm-hmm.
But the local ones that are just trying to service the needs that, if they weren't there, your community would be overrun with issues that you wouldn't be ready to face. I think that those organizations are really struggling. And I guess for me, when I think about trying to convince people of the value or of the worthiness of donating their time or their energy or their money to an organization, maybe, like, piggyback on all that Eddie said, because that addendum was useful too. Like, think about what's been poured into you, and think about what your community may not have, who else in your community, or what groups or what part of your community may not have had that poured into them. And if you value that after considering what you've been given, I think you will, there is likely someone already addressing that thing, and then find a way to connect. I think it starts with that sort of, like you said, like that inventory, and then finding how that connects with something else that's happening outside of you.
Yeah. Yeah. I would also like to reach out to a group. It was brought to my attention again in the digital world of serving clients and having conversations. I ran into someone who said, "Hey, I'm in a wheelchair and I'd like to serve. I'm doing okay for myself, and I've got an extra 3-4 hours. Do you know of any places that would, want somebody and have accessibility available for me?" And so I started brainstorming with them, just like, what are some different things that, people who may have accessibility issues, what are things that they could do as well? And so I know that one of the beautiful things that I was thinking through, there was an event that I hosted, not hosted. I was in charge of the marketing communications for a fundraising event, and brought along a friend of mine to help us plan the event so that it would be accessible for people who are utilizing wheelchairs and crutches and things of that sort. So utilizing those skills, because, I go through my life trying to be as empathetic and aware as possible, but my life experience is here.
Yeah.
And so, it's finite until I'm introduced to something else. So bringing in people from different backgrounds and perspectives is always a bonus to you or as an individual or organization. But just looking at, giving accessibility audits overall for an organization. Tech support, inclusivity meetings, when people are, attending to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. That is a major part of that as well. It's not just about skin color or where you're from. Accessibility is a huge part of that as well. So
it's huge.
As we think through ways in which we can do this, whether it be secular or in a religious setting, there are a lot of ways in which we can all have an impact where we are.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the level of need thing is just, is different for everyone. I know a lot of
Mm-hmm.
towns that are around me that don't have access to clean water. Their towns cannot get it together because of stuff that's like there's lead in the pipes, all
Yeah,
kinds of, like a Flint,
yeah.
Michigan situation. Basic things like that. If you care about clean water in your town, find out who's dealing with it. Just these this, I think, lack of trust for larger organizations is a good thing. We all are responding out of we've been cheated, let's push back. but
Mm-hmm.
but there just because we've been cheated and we've been treated poorly and we've been lied to doesn't mean that needs are gone. Those are all still there, and there are still organizations that are doing their best, not perfectly, because literally no one does that, but to provide a need. I also want to say something about um, being a watchdog or wanting a return on investment.
Mm-hmm.
You're not doing the work when you give money to something.
Right. Right.
um,
Right.
you might give money to something, but that doesn't make you an expert on that thing. And I think it's important to really take a step back and think about what you're doing. Are you actually doing the work that you want someone else to do? Are you willing to put the same energy into giving of your life so that that need that you care about can be met? 99% of the time, you're not going to be doing that work. And I don't, you know me, Eddie, I'm going to go for it. So like, this is
Yeah.
just the way
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
built. But,
Absolutely.
but the way that I feel like is the people that were the most critical of me when I've been working in shoestring operations, where people would be like, "Oh, we need to teach people how to fish, not give them a fish." I'm like, "Well, I'm giving fish to 200 people by myself. Why don't you come teach them how
Mm-hmm.
to?" Like, challenge yourself to move beyond your own comfort. I think that there's a lot here that's just, people distrusting but also not pushing themselves to be better. And
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
we sit in judgment a lot of organizations or people when we're not doing the work ourselves. And I always want to challenge people that we can do better on our own,
Yeah.
especially if we think other people should be doing better.
Yeah, and that goes by a motto I may have mentioned in another episode, which my parents said, Eddie, anytime you come with a problem, I need you to come up with 3 solutions.
Yeah, that's good.
Come to me with a problem. I want 3 solutions. They could be the absolute worst, wrong solutions in the world, but at least work towards a solution. So if you are someone who is looking at X nonprofit or charity and you're saying, ugh, I can't stand that they did X, great. How are you going to help them address that?
Yeah.
Better yet, forget how are you going to help them? How are you going to help the population they're serving address that need
Yeah.
in a better way, according to you? Because it's never, and I've been doing this for a long time, folks. It's never black and white with a nonprofit. There are so many things that are going into every person that is served. Everyone has a different situation going on. Every family that is in need, there's no cookie cutter to solving each person's issue. So that nonprofit, where they may say, okay, well, we can only spend 2 hours a week with this family. Well, this family really needed 7 hours that week, and this other family only needed a half hour. But it's really hard to be in a place of judgment if you're not trying to actively solve the problem. So I agree with you 100% that critique, absolutely. If somebody is putting their heart on the line, these people are working their tails off, you know, 50, 60, 70 hours a week, but only getting paid for 40.
True.
Realize that you've got to come with some solutions yourself,
Yeah, that's
and
good.
be ready to roll up your sleeves and get in there, because it takes all of us to get these things solved.
I agree. You know what's funny? You bring out the preacher in me still, or something. But I you got me think. I don't know what you said that made me think about Jesus and Judas, where Judas is the treasurer, right? So like he's got
Yeah.
he keeps charge of the money, and then there's that whole scene where a woman pours this expensive perfume all over Jesus's feet and anoints him and all that stuff, right? And he's like, well, hold up, that could have gone to people experiencing poverty and in need. And Jesus is like, but you don't understand. Like, you haven't gotten the whole picture, my friend. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's a lot of people who see some decisions that are made and they're like, wait, those funds are being used incorrectly, and don't necessarily have the whole picture. And I think it's important. We are gut reaction. I'm a gut reaction kind of person, and I've really had to learn to take multiple steps back before I come up with, well, wait a second. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's important to
Yeah.
really do that digging and that research and wonder, are they doing what's in line with their larger mission? And I'm just missing it, or is it an improper use of funds or resources? And
Yeah.
I think just generally being good students of our environment, of ourselves, of the things that we care about, I think is massive.
Mm.
And Eddie's a great student. He comes with data every time, and that's important. Like, we need to know the data and not just the feelings. That the facts over the feelings is an important part of this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's those
Well,
those
all of it together, I should say.
yeah, those stories that you spoke of, they evoke something out of us.
Yeah.
They're very evocative when we're talking about this group or that group. And for me, one of the things that I've learned, because I was that same guy instantly, I was on the "how dare you" train
Yeah.
when I
Same.
was younger, in my 30s, and I learned over time, holy cow! All right, got it. Slow your roll.
Slow down.
However, I think that it's a good idea to be curious,
Always.
to
Yes.
ask questions, to say, hey, I don't understand why you guys did this, or what is the benefit of doing things this way,
Mm.
as opposed to jumping on what I see on social media too much. And maybe again, this is just me being the old fart in the room. Like, guys, hey, have you ever thought? But just instead of jumping on the train and saying, yeah, well, this person's guilty, let's slow down. Let's figure out why are they guilty? I mean, why did they make the decision that they did as an organization? Why are they moving in this direction? Why was that person fired? All these different things that go into the gumbo of us trying to figure out who we want to trust and who we want to,
Mm.
not just donate our money to, but our time and our, because it's emotional too when you get in there and you see that family moving into the home for the first time.
Yeah.
Dude, there's nothing like it.
Yep.
For me, I was wrecked my first handful of times that I helped a family experiencing homelessness in the Midwest find a home, and then find that job, and their kid, who was doing D's and F's are now doing A's and B's or B's and C's and school. Like, you're just wrecked because you see that, and it's just one family.
Yep.
And that's where the data doesn't always tell the story. So it's,
Yeah. Oof.
I think there's so much involved in this conversation, but it's such an important conversation to have when we're thinking about how to better serve our brothers and sisters. Because I don't care if you are king in the mountain, at some point the snow's going to shift and you're going to find yourself on your backside, and you're going to need someone to give you that hand up, and you're going to be thankful that you took a moment to breathe and evaluate things, as opposed to being that person who just, you're guilty.
I completely agree. I think that there's a lot to that. There's, I grew up with this notion that the church is the one that's supposed to meet the needs of the community.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's in the scriptures. I think that's a human thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then people push back when the government's like, well, we need to serve people. We need to make sure people have basic needs met. And the church is like, well, we're the ones to do that. We don't want you to have our money. and then the church doesn't do it, and so people rightfully are upset by it. And I think I think the more we take a step back and get curious and think about what we do value, which is ourselves and each other, I think that we'll find lots and lots of places doing the amazing work of not just, that family, that story is powerful, and they're doing it for so many others. And hearing that is just life-changing for everybody, and it'll just invest in the community more. And I think the more we can take those steps back and be curious, the better. That just about everything.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree, brother. The Unbroken Place podcast is presented by Elevate One Consulting. The show was produced by Say Something Studios. Learn more about both of these in the show notes. The show's music is performed by Little Glass Men in Captive Portal. We want to thank you for being a part of the Unbroken Place community. Look for an ongoing conversation on Instagram and Facebook at the handle @UnbrokenPlace. You can also find some helpful resources at eddiepaulthomas.com. Make sure to sign up for our newsletter called OK on Second Thought on LinkedIn. Until next time, one love. At the Say Something Studios division of Elevate One Consulting, we don't just build websites, we craft unforgettable digital experiences. Imagine a place where design, development, UX, SEO, and management harmonize to elevate your brand to unprecedented exposure. A place where your website is not just seen, but felt, experienced, and remembered. Our expert team, equipped with unparalleled marketing insight, turns the everyday task of website design and management into a seamless, empowering journey. With Elevate One, you're not just launching a website, you're embarking on a transformative business adventure. We meticulously design every aspect, from intuitive navigation to stunning graphics, ensuring your digital space authentically represents your business ethos. Ready to transform your online presence into a thriving digital masterpiece? Visit us now at www.elevateoneconsulting.com and start your journey to digital excellence. Elevate One Consulting. Innovate, grow, elevate. Say Something Studios.